Hey, guys, we are back with yet again another free support Friday. If you guys are new out there, I see a lot of you hanging out. We've decided to start these about 5 minutes early, allowing anybody and everybody to get in a little sooner. And that way you guys can be all prepped and ready versus getting that notification right at the top of the hour. And as some of you guys have sent me messages telling me that, hey, I've joined 10 minutes late. Can you restart this or restart that? Or I missed this and I missed that, right? If you're new here, obviously, most of you are not according to my analytics, which is great that those of you that show up regular are always accounted for, and we can thank you for your support. But I am Fusion Phil over here at jitcadcam. I did bust out the OG t-shirt that I spilt water on 2 seconds before I started this video. So as you guys can see, this is going to be live. You'll probably see this lovely watermark go ahead and dry out throughout the series. Now, as you guys know, we always have to do an audio check and a video check at any time. If you guys can't hear me or I fail to switch screens, feel free to tell me in chat. Also, keep in mind you're open and welcome to ask questions at any time. So let's kick this off none other than the right way, to which this one goes out. Every week we do a buy me a beer. Whoever's bought me a beer, or a lot of you have bought me beers, usually the top beer contributor. I can't drink a beer on stream, but I am going to drink this energy drink here. And this goes out to my guy, Trip, over at Aero Marine in Biotech. He has, for some reason, all week long, reminded me of why I both love and hate Akuma machines, right? Not saying anything bad about Akuma, but all the little nitty gritty things, if you guys don't know about an Akuma, that you have to go through. For example, pre-staging a tool in the carousel. If you don't put that tool away, you're going to be stuck for about 45 minutes wondering what you're doing wrong, or if the post-processor is all messed up. That wasn't Trip's case. However, very much so, we did spend a lot of adequate time together. So Trip, this one goes out to you. Thank you for all the beer that I will be drinking later this week. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in and see what we can do. I think you guys can hear me just fine. I might be a little loud. I'm going to turn myself down. See how that works. Make sure we're not blowing out my microphone or peaking. And let's dive into a couple of things here. So I'm going to pull up my screen. I did get a special request from somebody. All good. Awesome. Travis, you were another one at the end of the day. You were in my inbox all week long, it seemed like. All for the better, right? So we're going to dive in. And I got this question about 12 hours ago from one of my customers. I don't know how I got in this position, but I think I'm going to change my name. Volume down volume went down when I shared the screen. All right, cool. I might have sit back. I think I sat back a little bit away from my microphone. Yeah, so I don't know how, but for some reason you guys all have reached out to me and started to treat me as the automotive expert when it comes to parts inside of Fusion. So maybe I'll start a new name for myself, not Fusion Phil, but maybe it'll be Four-Wheel Phil or something at this point. But anyways, somebody reached out to me late last night and said, hey man, I would really like to draw an intake plenum for one of my automotive projects, right? And I told him, well, this would be a great subject to kick off this week. As always, guys, you have the freedom to ask questions at any time. We can pivot to questions you have. I'm going to kick this off with some CAD stuff. Actually, right there's Guy himself, the one that was bugging me about this. But as I instructed Guy, there was a couple of things based off his design that he showed me. And I'm going to show you guys a couple of ways you can accomplish something like this. So for any of you that do know me, you know I love rectangles, right? And in the event of the design he sent me, there was a stagger when looking down on that actual part profile. So I'm going to go ahead and dimension this up. As you can see here, we can give that an overall width. And I'm going to guesstimate a lot of these numbers there. So if you guys are wondering, the numbers aren't necessarily important in this case. However, you're going to be able to scale this up or scale this down as needed. Overall length, of course, as well. Let's go ahead and put it at 12 inches. So from here, we can go ahead and dimension off the end if we needed. Maybe 1 inch. Again, at the other end. And with that, I can tie those 1 inch marks together by clicking that other dimension. So this is kind of a mirrored part. It's actually spun 180 degrees. The one that Guy plans to actually use and make at the end of the day, he's actually not going to have this offset, but the process from here forward actually ends up the same, right? So I'm going to extrude this, and what you guys are going to see here is this is going to take shape relatively fast, right? So again, you have your distance, whatever you're feeling necessary, and then from there, I need to actually set, and I'm going to use chamfer, but the idea is that I could set the angles for my intake runners, whatever that may be. So as you guys can see, is I'm just using equal distance. Maybe I want to do distance and angle because I need them a little steeper or a little more shallow based on that profile. Fully customizable and edit with this system right here. So now that I have those actual chamfers set, I can then, if I wanted to, create my intake runners off of here. In his case, he wants to make the plenum first because he's going to do nothing more than a little TIG welding for some tubing, right? So from here, I would clean up the outside of my design. So depending on how you want your design to look, I'm going to give this thing very few couple of fillets. Go ahead and give it some 1/2-inch fillets around the outside. I'm actually going to edit that last feature on my timeline because I could do all of my fillets in one shot if I wanted. So maybe up here, we go ahead and hit these edges with a 0.25. And then lastly, I'm going to add a few more as we work around the outside of this part. So give me a few seconds to select all my edges. And you're going to see the value of this when we actually do our next step, which is we are going to use the shell command to actually make a tub out of this. So again, maybe we're going to go to, I don't know, what can we get away with? Can we get with a 3/4? We can't because it's too tight of a radius in here. Again, we did a 1-inch offset. So maybe we can bump that one up to 1/2 inch. Nope, we're going to go down to 375. And as you're seeing, all those fillets are starting to populate around my profile. Now, again, guys, I'm no expert on intake plenums, and I'm by far the last thing from an expert in the modeling environment. However, as you can see, sometimes it's not about how you get to the finish line, as long as you get to the finish line. In Guy's case, he loves racing, and if, you know, the guy in the other lane blows his engine, you still got a chance regardless, right? So let's use our shell command and pick our top surface. I'm going to set my wall thickness to whatever I would like it to be. And as you can see, by using the shell command later in the process, it's carrying all of my fillets from the inside right into the outside to the inside, right? So as you can see here, we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Next thing I would want to do, in his case, he's going to put a cover on top of this, and we would actually have to give this our intake port in that, but it goes pretty smooth, right? So again, based on this face here, I am going to create a offset. And what that offset allows me to do is generate a flange surface. Again, we would have somewhere to put our bolt holes down through, and we're going to drag that down. Now we have that lovely lip sitting around. If I wanted to, I could also add a few more offsets if you were going to put an actual O-ring groove in here, or in his case, I assume he's going to use Formagasket. Now, again, we could just rinse and repeat the process, right? I want to put my actual intake runner hole locations. I'm going to drop a line. This is going to be a construction line. And what I'm looking for is just to generically place that line on that face, because later on, I'm going to come through and dimension that out. Now, that might be a little hard for you guys to see, and that's why I'm going to select it. But if I wanted to dimension this, again, we could set dimensions from wherever that dimension comes from, yada, 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 fully constraining it. Now, let's go back and do our circle. We do not want that as a construction line. I'm going to throw one at the end. Again, this is for a Chevy V8, if I remember correctly, right, Guy? I could go ahead and define those parts and where those hole locations are. Using a few things like constraints, we could equal up our circles. All 4 of these are going to be identical. As you can see here, we've now equaled them all together. And then we'll add a hole dimension, right? So let's say we're going to go 1 3/4 inches. Again, you could dimension from the end, allowing us to link these together at any time, making it easy. In his world, everything is actually kind of on center the same distance. So again, we could tie those dimensions together, allowing us only to have to change one dimension and making everything shift accordingly, right? As you guys are seeing here, I'm actually going to undo that because I think my circles aren't necessarily constrained properly, or I typed in the wrong number like I always do. So what is happening here? So this is fun. I always love when we do this stuff and everything goes ahead and breaks in a live setting. So as you can see, by typing in the distance between those dots, which should be the circle center, I have somehow automatically broken Fusion, and my sketch has disappeared, right? So this will happen from time to time. It's not a big deal, guys. We're just going to back up a few steps, maybe remove these dimensions, and see if we can attempt that one more time fixing it. So again, we have that first dimension. Let's go ahead and set the dimension for the first gap and then go through and dimension again and make sure things don't break. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that I don't have one of these circles actually on that line. And that is where those problems are coming from. The same thing here is it looks like, although I went ahead and dimensioned my first intake hole or my runner hole, I forgot to actually constrain them all to the same size as well. So let's go ahead and equal those up. Again, we'll just get this a little bit away from the fillet. And then once we get those set where we like it or whatever we're going to do, we can simply go through and extrude those holes. In the meantime, I see a lot of you guys out there, hole 3 and hole 4 not equal. Yep, I just caught that. Deep Thinker, great to see you in here. I should run through chat here. Adrian, awesome. Hello, great to see you. Who else up in here? We have Travis, Tim F's Adventure. Yeah, volume went down 100%. It looks like Chris Carter too. Guys, I love seeing you guys all in here. I busted out. This is the first shirt. So if you guys didn't know, I made this shirt with an iron and that printout when I went into business over a year ago off on my own. So again, you guys can see we went ahead and made our intake holes or our runner holes for that intake. I could also add, again, another sketch. Do the same thing on the other side, just a repeat. Maybe I want to give this a port to the front. Again, everyone is different. Let's not show favoritism here, even though in my opinion, yes, Chevy is much better than Ford. But let's go ahead and do an ellipse as if this was going to be our front intake hole here. And again, we do that extrude. We could do an offset to create that flange feature. No right or wrong system here, but as you guys can see, it's relatively straightforward to do something like this. I still need to add my holes, as you could imagine, for bolting my two halves together. And again, we could do that simply by placing our first hole. I'm going to place our first hole over here. I'm not going to get too crazy with its location, of course. And let's go ahead and say that's a 250 hole. Now, something that I think a lot of people don't realize that Fusion can do is if I use the pattern tool, I can do a pattern on path and I can pattern a feature, right? So one thing you guys are going to see here is I can actually go down to my timeline, grab that hole. My path is now the actual rail inside my part, and I can create a hole pattern that chases around my part. Now, notice here, I'm on center here as if it's only aligning to the path based on one direction. Now, we can go in and change this, right? So we could say optimize, we could say identical, we could actually change to path direction. There was one thing in particular, there it is as you can see, is based on the path direction, it is now aligned to me to the outside of my part profile. So if I wanted to put in 24 of these, and I want to drag them all the way around, what you're seeing is that path is going all the way around my part, right? So whatever that length of that inside area is, I can generate all the way around my part, right? So again, very easy to place all of those holes for bolting my two halves together. Now, the reason why I like using pattern at the solid level is because one, it calculates much faster, but two, when I'm creating a feature, whether it be an extrude or in this case using the hole tool, is the ability to go in and roll my timeline back in this case and go, hey, I forgot I want to put a chamfer on the top of that hole. For all of you out there in chat, I see you guys, don't hassle me about the fact I could have did that when I used the hole tool. What I'm showing you here is the fact that by putting it on as a separate feature and then rolling my timeline forward, I can actually add that now as an additional object in my pattern. So now by adding the chamfer with the hole command, what you're seeing is that's automatically going around and creating that pattern. Now, any of you guys have any other questions out there as I've kicked this off and you guys have seen, I've been able to do quite a bit in a short period of time, all because I've actually structured a pretty simple timeline down here at the bottom, allowing me to adjust along the way. But as you can see, although it does look kind of like a complex part, you can very efficiently go through and design something complex if you take a little bit and a few steps back to work on what you need specifically, right? Again, stacking up my fillets all in one spot, doing my fillets before my shell command makes all the difference for the way that volume is removed. Uh-oh. Hey, Kosh, how's it going? Did you have two separate components in an assembly and then remove any intersecting geometry? Hey, yeah, 100%. So you can do that fully. So Autodesk Fusion 360 Ambassador. What is that title? That's a good title. I prefer the one that my wife calls me all the time, the guy that has no idea what he's doing. But you are correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two components as he's asking. We'll just go ahead and use A. Again, we'll go up and do B. And then with that, we're just going to create nothing more than simple shapes. I like simple shapes because the idea isn't necessarily the body itself. In this case, it's going to be the outcome of the two bodies. So at any time, gosh, if you see me doing something wrong, please let me know. And if you were thinking about this a different way, again, by all means, let me know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a move command here. And then at this point, as the question was, I may have to read it a few times. I was blessed with math skills, not English skills. So you want to remove the intersecting geometry between the two. So you don't want to keep intersecting geometry. You want to just remove said geometry. So if I had two parts overlapping as such, if I did a combined command, one, I am going to capture this position because you guys saw me manually move it. But if I took my two parts and I went ahead and said cut, I can cut one using the other in this use case. So what I would do is actually reverse my selection here, pick my actual cylinder, then pick my square. And as you can see, I'm now removing the intersect between the two, but I want to keep my tool. And what that means is we're going to keep that original part there. So by hitting OK, you can see I now have a shorter cylinder. And on top of that, I'm still retaining that actual stock box in the background. I apologize for the stock box. The machinist in me says stock box. But just like that, doing that combine, I am combining two bodies. I'm actually cutting one body using the other body across two completely different components. I guess today's kind of design theme, huh? I mean, that it 100%. So, Chris, I am so glad you pointed that out because this one will blow your guys' mind. This one, I actually made a short video in my YouTube collection. It's probably one of the worst videos I think physically I have made. The audio sucks and the video sucks, so it's a twofer. But if you're doing soft jaws, right? And I'm going to do this the worst way possible. But let's just say here's one of my jaws. And now I want to go in and I want to cut those jaws. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a part that's going to cause kind of a dilemma, right? So let's say this is my part. And you guys will see this come full force here in a second. But if you're making soft jaws, and let's go ahead and bring this down. It's going to be a new body. And we're going to repeat that extrude back the other way, right? So trying to think in my brain which way I thought to do this. Okay, we're actually going to extrude this outer profile back up. Again, new body, and then we're going to combine these two things together, right? So what's going to happen is we are going to end up with a kind of funny situation here because I am now going to move this downwards, right? Oh, back up a couple of steps here. Because when we went in and did our combine, we don't need to keep tool. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to move this guy down, right? And if you didn't know, we're going to cause a conflict with what's going on. So we want to move the whole body. There we go. So if I do a soft jaw kind of move here, I'm going to do my combine. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this using this, right? Now, what's going to happen is you kind of see it is we're going to have these floating cylinders there. And this used to happen to me quite a bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep the tool again because I would like to keep my part for machining purposes. But notice what happened to my body count. So I'm going to back up. So we went from one body to body. And when I did that combine, we now have 3 and 4 body, right? So you see these two guys floating out in space. And now you should have did this with components. So all you guys know would have been the right way to do it. Is these are going to get in your way. They're going to cause problems. There's going to be, for some reason, you're going to collect your setup and you're going to have just weird stuff happen. I get this ticket about once a week where my toolpath doesn't go here. Well, there's a body floating around in the background like these two here. But I can actually go to these bodies and I can right click and I can come down here and I can hit remove. And what that does, as you can see, is removes that body completely out of my timeline, right? So because we have that floating individual body or piece of a component out there, that could cause problems, you can actually just go in and right click and remove that stuff to get it out of the way. So I'm going to get back over to the chat. Awesome. 100% perfect for soft jaws. Cool. Yep. I mean, you can 100%. So you have that ability to modify a body using another body, even at the component level. So you can jump across components depending on that. Another thing, Kosh, if you're still out there, Kosh, I would show you this one as well. I think a lot of people don't quite think fully this is a really good example, right? So I designed this component, or not a component, I designed it as an individual part. So I actually broke a rule because at the end of the day, guy's gonna wanna probably put his runners on here as well as that top hat section. So what I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna save this. This is gonna be plenum lower. And now the proper way I should have designed this is I should have started out, as you guys saw me do, is new components. Well, it's too late for that problem, but it's early enough that we can kind of restart the whole process without having to redesign everything. So what you guys are seeing me do is I'm bringing that component in and then I'm breaking the link. And what that has just now done is turned our new file into an assembly, up the original component. And if we go to that component and click on the timeline, you're going to notice all of my features are still down here to modify. So let's go ahead and do the next part of this, right? So now my top section of this can be controlled by the bottom section of it. How that works is we now have our upper, right? And by having my upper active, I could then create a sketch against this face if I wanted. And for demonstration purposes, we're just going to keep it very square. But I want to show you why this is so important, right? So you guys are seeing all these holes are pulling through automatically, things like that. But the way my timeline has done is it's kind of like chapters in a book. You don't want to jump from one chapter to another chapter or read a chapter before certain chapters, right? Yours truly doesn't know how to read. Still sometimes have to take my boots off to count to 20. But as you're going to see here is I can at any time in my timeline, if I remember that pattern, right? I can go back and edit that. And because that pattern has occurred long before we created that upper component, what you're seeing is it jump across components with its history, right? So again, is when you're designing or starting to build an assembly, it's nice to create your features in a certain order so that they carry through from one to the other, right? We wouldn't want Guy to have a problem with his actual bolt hole pattern not lining up. And that's how we've now stacked these two together to achieve that task. So with that, does anybody else have any other questions? Anybody else want to see anything different? I'll go ahead and open up the mic to you. I don't know what has happened today. We've somehow got 42 views in here already, and I'm 23 minutes into it. Another thing we could do is, again, it's just rinse and repeat from here, guys, is we can add another new component. This could be, you know, left-hand runner. Again, we create our sketch based on our spacing here. This is very valuable to know as we start to build our other items, right? So if I go ahead and create my offset, I want to go ahead and create a flange around this possibly as well. Let's go ahead and just do nothing more than a slot. Make our lives easy. And just like this is going to look a little wild. So those of you, again, out there always judging me about how terrible I am at some of this stuff, more than okay. But there is our flange. And now I can go in, and if I wanted to extend out the actual cylinders, or not the cylinders, but what would be the tubing, I could do that as well. So again, we could do our join. Maybe he's not going to use something as this nature. He might actually use a loft between two surfaces. So again, you guys have a lot of ways to manipulate this. The idea is you're now starting to see the way components stack up and the way you can place components to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to do. Cool, guys. Do you have any questions out there? Any questions at all? We do have the Discord open up. Make sure nobody's asking questions in Discord. If you guys have any questions or you want to provide any information, feel free, put it in chat. As well, you guys can actually reach out to me directly. There is a support email down below in this video. You can send in, we'll auto create a ticket, and I will be more than happy to look at that stuff as well. How's everybody's week outside of that? I'm surprised we don't have any cam questions yet. People are like, oh, he's doing modeling. Do all this modeling stuff. This will be fun. Again, opening that floor up for any questions, any problems anybody's having. It always seems like you guys just more enjoy watching me work than it is anything else. Deep Thinker, I see your question. So is that one solid body now? When I did that, no, that actually turned it into two separate bodies. I can't remember what part you were asking about, but when I did my combine command, I actually pulled it to do a cut and keep, not a join type of scenario. Anybody else? I love when you guys don't ask questions. You make me nervous. Should I just keep plugging away at something like this? That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to keep designing this part free of charge. You guys will be able to see it all. What we're actually going to do is we're going to change things up here a little bit on how this design is. We're going to go new body. Let's actually go down a ways. And we have that flange now. With that flange, we're going to start to build out the next little segments. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually reach back across. And what I'm looking for is the sketch to the lower. That would be, where did we do that projected sketch? Let's go back. There we go. Again, we can go ahead and use that sketch by getting the body out of the way. And we're going to take the outside and the inside. Again, bringing it up, doing a join because we want those two bodies to intersect. And then from here, we could start to change and modify our profiles. Is there an easy way to work with a DXF file without clicking thousands of lines? All right, that's a good one, Chris. Chris, what is your application is what I'm going to ask you. Are you trying to do laser plasma work, or are you trying to convert a DXF to a solid model? And I would also have to ask, is there multiple sketches in this DXF that you're referring to? In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and turn off the lower, and let's go ahead and get the left hand out of the way because we can go in and do our shell command again. Now, what you're going to notice is based on our shell command, we have that full freedom to go in, plug in whatever it is. But one thing that is going to happen here because of our holes, again, our timeline is very important to how things are going to interact with one another. So we may want to extrude those holes first time round and then come through and put the holes in later. So you guys did see me do something that could be classified as a little bit lazy. And we could roll back our timeline again as when we did that first extrude. I'm going to go in and we're going to actually punch all the holes in this here real quick. Again, what you'll see happen now when I hit OK is it has fixed and cleaned up this edge. But something it has also done, again, based off how we've done this, is it's not only shelled out the entire part, but it's given us that wall thickness through everything. Engraving with a CNC. Okay, I like this. This is a good question. So I would say, are you using like trace or 2D contour for the engraving toolpath, Chris? Mastercam. Gonna use Mastercam to select all those edges. Awesome. So Chris, check this out. So I actually had to do this with a customer of mine. Is I am gonna replicate this because I do not actually have a EXF to pull up quickly, but I've completed exactly that, right? So I have my sketches here. I am going to go ahead and place this on a box, and then we're going to have the freedom to engrave this as you're asking. So when I go to manufacture, if I'm going to do my normal setup, this is where we find out that old Fusion Fill over here doesn't know which way Z-axis is. But if I go to 2D Trace, for example, and I'm using 2D Trace because it's on center, as well, it is not utilizing a lead in and lead out scenario, right? So I've picked my tool. Now, Chris's case, he doesn't want to go through, and as you see here, I have 3 separate little segments of lines that I would have to pick. Now, I did luck out because these are boundaries, so it does actually see this as a closed chain and loop itself back around. But what I can do, instead of selecting all these edges, I'm going to go in is I'm going to go back to my model, and where that DXF sits, which is going to be a sketch, is I can pick that instead. And upon hitting OK, what you're going to see is that is now going to go out and trace that actual sketch, regardless of how it looks. And if I was to go back to design, this is, again, kind of something nice. So if you wanted to change this, maybe we're going to add a line across here for that customer, and then I'm going to sprinkle in just, let's throw a spline at it, right? So again, when I add more actual sketch lines to that sketch, when we jump back to manufacture, of course, we'll have that arrow, but upon regenerating, it's automatically picked up on this. So this is super handy if you guys are doing any engraving of parts, part numbers, anything like that. Chris, I know, right? This is, you know, I love doing these videos on Friday. It was shocking to me when all of you guys came in and told me about broaching, and you're like, oh, we use trace for broaching. And I've never thought about trace for broaching. And now there's a video about trace for broaching. So I see not sure, that's a good name, not sure out there. He is saying window select. So you could do a window select in some cases. You're not wrong. Again, we could go back to our geometry. If we go ahead and get our model out of the way, you can do a window select. And what I'm doing is right click circle here. So again, you do have a couple of different ways to try to select that geometry. But I would still tell you the fastest way, in my opinion, is to do everything based on picking up that sketch. Right, based on your actual sketch plane from your design. Any other questions outside of that? We see 14 people in here. I see a high number, 14. 14 is a high number today. I think the most I've ever seen is 21 active viewers at one shot. What other kind of crazy questions do we have lingering? Oh, here we go. Deep Thinker, what do you got for me? Damn question. Make a large V block. I'm looking to see if you can rough out the V with an end mill and finish with a tapered tool. Easy enough. I tell you what, though, Deep Thinker, you're in here all the time, man. I might have to start charging you beers. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a V block, right? So rectangle and a V profile, right? And for perspective of me not knowing how big I draw stuff, we're going to go ahead and shrink this down just a little bit. And we are going to give this a solid number for an angle so that it doesn't look silly later on. And how tall are we? Let's shrink that down to 2 inches. That's something like you're thinking right there. Deep Thinker. And we'll mirror this across. I saw another question come in, so guys, give me a hot minute to get this part. I'll wait for Deep Thinker to let me know if this works for it. So can you thread mill from a center point and then write a diameter so that when you save templates, you don't have to think about hole diameter on your part? Yes, you can. We can definitely do that. So it is very close to the same as raster for sure. Not sure, are you a Mastercam user? I assume you are. But ads, we'll go ahead and jump on that question here in a second. Chris, did we lose you? Is this part file going to work for you? Hey, you know, not sure. I used to use Mastercam all the time. I'm certified in it completely. And no offense, I still have a special place in my heart for Mastercam. But there was a time where I was doing engine heads for tractor pull guys because I'm originally from Iowa, which now you all know makes sense that I live in North Dakota. But I used to do everything on a billet engine head inside of Fusion. And then I would do porting in Mastercam. And it's nothing against Mastercam at all. It's Fusion was just so much faster to achieve a lot of the things we were doing. Guy himself, the one that suggested me doing the intake plenum to start, he he's encountering that right now, where Fusion has made it so simple to achieve a lot of those tasks. Okay, cool. Iowa, where are you at in Iowa? Not sure. So let's go ahead and switch. It looks like this is going to work for Deep Thinker. Again, we create our setup, yada, yada, yada. And I am going to throw pocket clearing at this just for stock representation. So all of you guys know yours truly loves flat end mills for some reason. We're going to go with the bowl this week. And there we go. We've roughed out our part. So if I wanted to machine down this face with a tapered end mill, we did set that angle to 20 degrees. But if I go ahead and do 2D contour, I am going to need a tool to do so. So we're going to go ahead and pick either chamfer mill or a spot drill. I can't ever remember which one is the correct one to use for this. So you guys get to see me double duty this. But we're not a 120. We should be, I'm trying to think, what is it? Oh man, math is going to get me today. So 90 would be 45, which would mean we need to go to a 40-degree angle because this is an inclusive angle from side to side, not from center line. So there's my 40-degree tool. Now, if I want to machine this wall and I want to come down that taper, when I go in and I actually set my multiple depths, I believe, if I still remember, there is what's called a taper angle. So you can set your wall taper angle here. And now with that, if I go ahead and select the bottom of that pocket, what you're going to see is we can now define that tool to go down, or we can crash the tool path. So this is where I always forget. Is it a chamfer mill or is it a spot drill? As you guys are seeing, you can't do this with that tool in particular. And the reason for that is because that is forcing the idea that you're doing chamfering, right? So we're going to go ahead and turn off chamfer. And now, as you can see, it is running across that horizontal face and stepping down as it does so. Oh, you're in Minnesota. That's even worse, man. I've lived on both sides of your state. You can't get mad at me. Protected you from the south and the west at this point. Put a flat tip on it? Sure, no problem. So again, if we edit that tool, again, we can ramp it up, ramp it down. So here's my cutter. We could go ahead and say, you know, actually it's a 1/2 inch diameter. And then tool nip nose diameter, let's say 0.2. And then one thing else I will have to go check real quick, because I think if I am legendary for pushing Control T, we need to make sure that we are still using left compensation. Again, that is going to come from the tip of our tool. And we want to make sure that there's nothing else on. Any other questions outside of that? Again, that's with your flat tool running down that wall. Now, keep in mind, just something for you to remember, I selected this edge down here. So what's happening in this tool path is it is aligning the outside edge of this tool. And that's why you guys are seeing it kind of walk itself away a little strange. So I would need to define the edge that I wanted to pick further out, right? So if I pick this edge here, and then I say I want to go to a selected bottom, again, picking the bottom of my profile, notice how my tool has now moved over and is now machining down that wall, as you see. 100%, man. And I don't like taxes. I don't think anybody likes taxes, right? Nothing like taxes on payroll, taxes on your purchases, taxes on your home, taxes on your car. What do you think, Deep Thinker? Is this going to work for you? In the meantime, anybody else have any other questions? You guys are coming and going quite a bit. So I don't know. You guys on lunch break, you jumping on, you're like, oh man, this guy's doing live. And then you come in here and he's like machining down a tapered wall. That's pretty crazy. Any other questions in the meantime? For anybody that's joining us, feel free to ask questions in chat. You guys can message us on Discord directly. And I should pull up my support board just to make sure. There's a link down below. If you want to email in a file, you can go ahead and provide that to that support email address. It will auto create a ticket for you. Go ahead and give you guys a few seconds to think up some good stuff. Surface that angle with a ball end mill? Yeah, completely doable. Chris, I appreciate it, man. I absolutely enjoy this. And it's honestly, if you guys all sat on this side of the computer every once in a while, I mean, my Tuesday to Thursday was crazy. It was absolutely wild with the amount of support requests that I was getting, and it seemed like the world was burning down. But in the case of this, sure, not sure, I should say, we'll go ahead and do it with the ball end mill. So if I go in and I do 3D contour, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. I'm going to show you contour first. I am going to pick the boundary I want to work with. Click it a second time to extend that boundary upwards. Now, I'm going to allow my tool to stay center on boundary, and I am going to turn on what's called contact boundary. Contact point boundary will actually shift that tool from center line to center of where the radius sits. Again, we're going to go ahead and swap our tool out here for a ball. And there's our 1/2 inch ball. We could change our step down to whatever it is. I'm going to leave mine at 40, and we're going to see what we get. And as you can see, I could come down that wall with a ball end mill, pretty straightforward. Now, if I would have left off contact point boundary, just to give you guys an example here, what you're going to see is we're going to start higher up on the part, which means we're actually starting over the edge of the part and then coming down that wall. So what you see is this kind of hockey stick, being a guy that's played hockey and lived in the polar north, is that hockey stick effect happens, but also when we get to the bottom, because the center of this tool can't go past this lower edge that we selected, that's why we use contact point boundary. So again, we'll go ahead and kick that back on. We'll hit OK. And then we're going right back and forth across there. Yeah, so you can definitely zigzag. So what you could do is you could actually say, if I really wanted to streamline this tool path, we're going to say both ways. And then from that, we could actually tell it not to retract. We could actually do a plunge, a profile, a, no contact, shortest distance type of transition. Again, we're still getting a helix here. So let's pop that helix out. Again, we're just going to plunge. And now what you're seeing is a loop in, loop out, real fast procedure just to go down that wall. I do want to get back real quick. Let's scroll back up in here. Mads had a question about thread milling. So Mads, I'm going to go ahead and answer that question. Are you still out there? In the meantime, guys, we've hit 70 viewers so far, and we have 16 current viewers. We're closing in on that top spot. Are we gonna exceed the max this week? Also, all of you that are new jumping in here, feel free to ask questions at any time. I would like to answer any problems you've had in Fusion or anything that you were curious to see. As some of you are seeing in not sure out there, not sure is challenging me to Mastercam questions and to see how they're done. Ads, if you're still out there, go ahead and give me a thumbs up in chat or hit the like button. So I know, so I can go ahead and go back to that question about your thread milling. In the meantime, not sure. Here's another one you could have done here, is we could have actually did a parallel toolpath as well. So with that parallel toolpath, it works the same. I would have to define a boundary. Again, double click, get it over to this side, turn on my contact point boundary. Again, whatever my actual, in this case, would be step over, whatever that would be. And as you can see, we could actually run up the surface or horizontal to the surface, all by defining a direction, right? So I could actually say, I want to set a direction this way. And now we're machining back and forth along that surface again. Good afternoon from Calgary. Awesome. Always happy. Is that Calgary, California, or is that Calgary, Canada? Looks like we lost Mads, but Mads, I'm going to go ahead and attempt to answer your question. So Mads had a question about creating templates that involve thread milling. Alberta. Oh, even better. So in the event you are doing thread milling or tapping inside of Fusion, there's a couple of things you could do. So more than not, let's go ahead and do a rectangle with a hole in it. Let's say, for example, this is my hole, right? If this is a 1/2 inch hole, and let's go ahead and make my block a little bit smaller. And I want to create templates for something I'm doing, is I have a lot of options when it comes to those toolpath templates. Now, keep in mind, in most softwares, I'm going to attempt this as a half 13. When your software, if you're not using Fusion, creates a hole, it's usually defined as a tapped hole, which means it's going to be the minimum thread diameter internally or maximum thread diameter externally, right? So as you can see here with my half 13, what has happened is it has taken a 1/2 inch hole and it has now made it a 423, right? Tap drill size for this particular hole. So as you can see, I'm going to go ahead and now switch over to the other side of Fusion, right? So when I go into the manufacturer workspace, we create our setup, same thing, blah, 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 right? Now, if I was doing a lot of thread milling, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and define my thread. Now, the key element about thread milling is the fact that you need to know a thread pitch, of course, as well. You need to know your pitch diameter offset. What that is how much larger does this need to be, right? Now, a lot of people overthink this, but this is based on a diameter amount. Given we're doing a half 13 hole, we would set this to whatever it is. I'm going to make a very uneducated guess of, what is it, like 77? And then our thread pitch is going to be 1 divided by 13. And as you can see, we could set our thread pitch and our pitch diameter, right? And now it's going to ask us, what is this hole? Now, if I was making templates, this is my opinion on it. I would actually, instead of saying a selected face, I could do diameter range. And what diameter range would allow you to do is find any hole between, let's say, 420 and 440, right? And what that will do on your part is it will go out and find those holes specifically. Now, I'm going to set this a little bit bigger because I think my dimensions are way off, and this is not quite working the way I want it to. So let's see what is causing that problem, right? Let's go for a selected face. And, well, obviously, I know the problem now. You guys know the problem? This happens every week. Yours truly gets too fast. I'm a pause. I'm going to let you guys fight it out in chat. Why do you think this isn't finding the hole? This is on you guys at this point. You guys get to sit back and think about this. First one with the right answer, I'm going to give you a shout out. Oh, 21 viewers. What just happened? Y'all botting me now? For those of you that have just joined, I am pop quizzing you guys so that you can claim this video content on your guys' ISO continuous education today. Go ahead and send me the form. I'll sign off on it. But why is it that when I'm going in here and I'm saying a diameter mode for this threaded hole, and I set a minimum and a maximum. Now, my Z-axis is vertical. We know the cylinder is vertical. Why is it, do you think, that this isn't finding a hole? I knew the moment that I clicked that hole surface, the one thing that I am terrible at doing. And yes, Andreas is the guy that is building our Discord channel. Andreas, I was thinking about you when I logged into Discord this morning, wondering when he's going to put all these live implementations in. So the reason why we're not actually finding a hole is because Fusion doesn't know the tool. So as you guys can see here, as we could go out, again, I'm not going to build a crazy thread mill tool. Let's go ahead and do something relatively simple. If I can find the thread mill profile, there we go. Cutter diameter, 0.4, awesome. So that's going to fit inside of our hole. Now, one cool thing that you can do here is we could set our thread pitch, again, 1 divided by 13, because it's for a half 13. And from that, we have everything defined. So again, we select our tool. Now you can see that tool is populating our half 13 threading cycle. So if I wanted to turn that into a template, I could actually do this based off utilizing a diameter range. And now I could close in that diameter range. Mads, I see you back here. But I'm going to show you another thing that's really neat about this. So if I actually call it a selected face and I pick that face, one thing I can do is when I create my template, I think a lot of people overthink this, is there's what's called store as full template. And what that is going to allow you to do is this will give you that ability to pick the surfaces from this template, right? As you're going to see is we're going to go ahead and put this in my template folder. You guys all know that I don't use very many templates, but now that I have that built in there is if I ever have to do a half 13 hole, again, you can make that decision. Do you want to use hole diameter? I think I would recommend hole diameter. You don't apply the wrong template. But if I go down and I say create from template half 13, it should have populated me the question to pick circular faces, and for some reason, mine did not. And that is the major difference between a whole template and a regular template. So again, let's go ahead and take a look here. It did save it as a correct template. However, maybe with thread milling, it doesn't accept the fact that it is a whole template, right? Nope. So it doesn't think that it's a whole template, the same as if we were to go in with our 423 drill. Give me a quick second here, guys. In case you guys know, you could search this in the top left corner. You don't have to speed wheel it down. Again, we do our selected whole. Boom. Let's turn this into a whole template. So again, drill, save it to the cloud. Sure. Let's override it. So the way a whole template should work, and it's not doing it on either one of these. This is kind of cool. This is new to me. Let's go through and try this one more time. Let's do a little bit more info to our whole. Let's stack two of them together. I'm waiting. I'm avoiding looking at my chat right now, if you guys are wondering, because I don't want to look over there and then you guys be like, yeah, you can't do it with just one, right? Let's do it this time. Again, let's go in for our template operations. Yeah, so there must be a bug. It used to actually prompt you to select a whole. So it looks like something crazy has happened in the background of Fusion once again. I know there was a bug within the last 5 days. They updated and then they updated again today. Every time I open Fusion as you guys know, I am a big fan of anything that might be dark mode. But I use River Rubicon as my background versus the flash bang of the white screen right now. Your boy's pretty white. It's very reflective. But for some reason, that last update, every time I came in, the River Rubicon was defaulted back to photo booth. Awesome. Seeing 22 of you guys. I think this is a record high. 22 live viewers right now. You guys have any other questions? Mads, did that kind of answer your question at the end of the day? Because if we would fix this, and we would go back to like 420 to what, 426? Oh, let's see here. 426. Oh, we got to go a little bigger. Maybe I was off of my size of my head. There we go. Again, now we are using a diameter range. If we store that as a template, we can again pull that template at any time. And now when you pull that template, with the exception that you would have to regenerate, actually mine is set to auto regenerate, so you can see it automatically finds the hole now. So I see another question from Not Sure. Can you prune/graft an existing model in the CAD side? Prune, can you send me a link to an example of that, and I will see what I can replicate inside of Fusion? Keep in mind, I've been out of Mastercam now for probably 7 years. Any other questions from anybody out there? What do you guys got for me? Again, opening up the floor. Time is it? How long we been going? We've been going 50, 53, 58 minutes. Today. I hit you guys with the common best ways to support our channel while you guys put more questions in chat. So you guys know there's a lot of ways you guys can help support this channel and continue to help make it grow. Obviously, the easiest one is to like, subscribe, and share our content. So if anybody has any questions that you see out there that I have video content on, or you want to invite people to these Fusion Friday contests so that you can come in and ask me questions about things you may have experienced throughout the day, that is, of course, the freest way possible to support this channel. Now, if you want to give a little bit, by all means, you could also buy me a beer. There's a link down below to my website. Beers are $3 a piece. We obviously will take as many as you're willing to buy. You can also make jitcadcam your reseller, which allows you guys to, again, you can purchase your Autodesk software directly through me. Again, supporting this channel in any way possible. We also have the ability to do things like custom trainings, on-site trainings, and even post-processor development. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump back. It looks like we got a little bit back. Oh, yours truly back on himself. let's get back to the screen share. So send a link. It's not a Mastercam thing. It's, okay. Can you send me a link of what it is and I will take a peek at it and we can see what we could do. Any other questions out there from anybody and everybody? Guy, are you still hanging around waiting for me to go back to working on your stuff? We'll go ahead and clean up some of what we had on Guy's part here. Let's go ahead and get rid of some of these dummy files we have floating around. So what we're going to have to do here is we're going to actually have to change the order at which we did some stuff. What I'm going to do is not extrude that outside flange. Let's go ahead and delete. And what we're going to do is we are going to re-extrude that profile. There we go. And then if I was to do the shell command now you can see I can create that inside profile. And then with that, I'm going to then turn on that flange sketch that we've kind of drawn. And now if I extrude this time, that outside flange, I can very easily create that pattern or that lip to bolt the two halves together. Now, for some of you guys, if you don't know, I've extruded this sketch here, which means there was no holes that were projected when we created a sketch. Now, if I would go down to our other sketch, and let me go ahead and delete this, let's do that extrude from our other sketch. This sketch has all the holes already in it, right? So again, as if we drag that up and we say join, we now have our two halves. They're joined together, our through holes. Again, not the cleanest of things. We do have a line intersecting those holes because they're too close to the profile. But as you guys can see from one to the other, you have that carry through relatively easy. Again, making that upper plenum hat piece mate to the bottom part and align according to all those holes. But because we've kind of used one component to design our other components, we always have that freedom to go back and fix of anything and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that original hole. Now, if I couldn't find that hole for some reason, it's kind of cool in Fusion. You could actually pick a feature that you're looking for, and it will highlight it with the 3 lines down here. Now, that is in my pattern, and that's why it's recognizing the pattern. But if I go a couple steps forward, you can notice it finds that first hole, right? So sometimes you got to do a little bit of detective work. And in this case of detective work, we're going to go ahead and drag that hole further out. That way, my holes are now pushed further out and around my part. I am actually going to delete the chamfer out of here because what I don't want in this case is I'm going to chamfer it later. And the idea is I don't want that chamfer to actually be the profile that's pulled into my actual upper part of my design. So again, we can go ahead and trigger all of that stuff. We can go back to our timeline and we can walk our way through and see what has all happened. Now, I do see some other questions come in. Let's see, what do we got? Deep Thinker. You have a go-to design to do a patch skin to avoid pockets or holes, or can it be done in manufacture? Oh man, I love this. This is a good question. Deep Thinker, there's probably 3+ ways to do this. And next Wednesday, I have quite the thing for you guys. I am going to do a workflow Wednesday, and to give you guys a taste of this, let's see if I have a model over here yet. So what I'm going to do is give me one quick sec. I'm going to go ahead and take away my screen because I need to do something to this part before I pull it up. And it's not me trying to bait and switch you. I just need to manipulate this body so that nobody gets a nasty, nasty letter. So give me a quick second here. And there we go. And there we go. I'm actually using the remove command. I know you guys can't see this in the background, but there. All right. Oh, I got to do a few more things to this part just to clean up the design. How's everybody's week so far? You guys have a good week? Bad week? Glad it's Friday? Bad it's Friday? All right, let's save this. Okay, so I am now going to reshare my screen. So you guys can see this part, right? So a customer sent me this actual whole concept, right? They were like, You see this part, you see all the things going on in this part. How can I remove certain things on this part? Now, old Fusion Fill would have told you to go in and pick the feature you want and hit the delete key, right? Well, you don't need to actually do that. So this comes in as a step model natively. And as you can see in my timeline, with the exception that I have modified its design so that I don't give away anybody's parts, what you're going to see is under the Modify tab, and you do have to have your timeline turned on, you could actually do what's called Remove Feature. And what this is going to do for you is I'm going to pick my part, and now I want to select all holes, right? Now notice how no holes show up, but if I increase the size here for that feature, notice how it has gone out and found all of those holes for me, right? Again, based on its size of diameter, it's going to change those hole sizes, but it gets cooler, right? So if I want to remove all fillets, as you can see here, I can do either all fillets on the part, right? So I could scale this up or scale it down to only do certain diameter fillets. But what you're seeing is real fast in real time is I can go in and I can delete those. And now it's re-recognizing new fillets. Again, because certain fillets are stacked on top of one of each other. So again, as if you're looking for a really good workflow, one, you should never modify the part you intend to make. So you would do a copy and a paste so that you have two versions. Let's get the original out of the way. And then we jump in and we go in and we do our simplify. Let's go ahead and remove the fillets. And then just like that, we've deleted all of those features. And now we have two completely different parts to play around with, right? So on the manufacturing side, I've did a video on this, but it's really good, is if I wanted to go in and I wanted to adaptive clear out this part, there's a certain time to add model, right? So in my setup, when I create my setup, the part I want to manufacture, I want to make sure that is the finished part for the customer, right? In this case, I don't want the part without fillets. I want the part with fillets. And that is the part for manufacturing. But for certain operations now, I may want to go in and machine and add an additional model. This is where I could go through and I could pick up additional models, additional patches, things like that, right? So if we were to give this a tool, obviously we're going for the 1/2-inch end mill. It always makes sense to go for that. And then we're going to go ahead and fix our Z-axis orientation. And now we can regenerate that toolpath. What's going to happen is normally you have all of those fillets on your part, which means your toolpath could actually be crazy because it's going to try to step up and down and around. And how you're seeing this is because even though we removed certain fillets, again, internal fillets like this are still there because we've told it, machine it based on the combination of both models. On the combination of both models, you will see that certain areas are always going to still be there because it removed the fillet, right? It's not like it made the cylinder bigger, but out here on this external edge, you're seeing that it gave us a hard, sharp edge based on that information. Deep Thinker, I hope this helps a little bit. Again, using patches even and model, you could do this exact same thing. So guys, by all means, don't hesitate to go out and get your notifications right now because again, on Wednesday at 1 o'clock live, we will be discussing that simplify feature much more in depth and how it can affect your workflow and how it actually has changed my whole workflow. Anybody else have any other questions outside of that while we go ahead and hang out here? Man, 92 views. We're coming up on it. We're not even, we made it past the 1 hour mark. So 1 hour into this, we have 93 views now. 17 of you sitting here wondering probably why it is that I do this, right? We'll go ahead and open up the floor. Maybe I'll go hit a bathroom break and pause real quick unless anybody has some questions and we can dive back into some much more fun things. It actually reminds me, so you have an awesome part like this thanks to Deep Thinker wanting a V block, but one cool thing about that V block is if you guys had the machining extension, when it comes into weird profiles like this, it is a blast to be able to go in and do deburr, right? So you could use your ball end mill, whatever you choose to use. Again, it's automatically going to go out and pick all the edges that it can machine. And from there, based on the clearance of my tool, it will only machine certain areas it can, or I can modify from that what it can and cannot do. So I could say anywhere there is a unreachable corner cut with tip a tool. We could also ramp this up to multi-axis. Now, for some of you, you're probably wondering why it doesn't go all the way down in these areas yet. Well, the idea is because we do have shaft and holder clearances. So I would have to, in this tool's case, pick this tool out a little bit further. So let's go ahead and bump up that tool. Let's go and stick out length below holder to 2 inches. This is where I always get myself in trouble. In case you guys didn't know, I don't know how deep this pocket is because we completely winged it when we drew it. But as you can see now, that deburr toolpath is getting all the way down those hard, crispy edges and actually stepping out away from our part and machining those lovely little corners to break those edges with whatever we set. Again, any questions that all you guys have, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and make sure nobody has put a ticket in. And of course, I'm also going to scrub the old Discord channel. We do have a Discord channel. If you guys want to join us on Discord, you could ask questions there. From that, okay. So nothing at this point on the support side of things. We are at our halfway point. I'm not seeing a ton of questions come in. Either you guys are absolutely trying to figure out some way to stump me, or you have more curiosities that you can think about faster than you can type. So I'm going to go ahead and take a pause for 5 minutes, and I will be right back. All right, we're back. I see a couple of questions come through. So, can you do a manual inspect and find the diameter of a ball? I can think of maybe a couple of ways we could do that, but let's go for it, right? So if we create a sphere, and that's a 1-inch sphere, let's see what we can do with our manufacturer side of things. So we're going to do a manual inspect. As you're going to notice is I can't actually pick the sphere, but this kind of leads us into a couple of things, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back to design. And if I really needed to find the sphere diameter, I'm going to copy and paste that sphere. And then from that, I'm going to split that body, utilizing my origin in this case, or a plane. And now what you see is we have multiple kind of bodies going on here. But I think at the end of the day, if we go in and do inspect, manual inspect, I should be able to grab that edge. Now I can grab the flat, but it looks like I cannot actually pick. Let's see. Yeah, so it looks like we can't actually pick that outside diameter. So what you would have to do is kind of make a dummy profile to pull that off. So again, a lot of things you can and cannot do. I would honestly just make a square, I guess, and then utilize that info, and I could do that here. So if we go back to the design side of things, and if I had a box, again, what I'm going to do is create this very small. And we're going to do, trying to think the best way to go about this. Yeah, technically it won't matter, but let's just say this was my box instead as a ghost image or a ghost part. When I do that actual inspect, manual inspect, I can now pick the sides of my box, and then that box could be turned off, right? So based on that sphere, again, you guys would align that much more perfect than I am doing, but that would give you the manual inspect against that, but it would be the sphere in place of that box. That would be a good way to work around it. It's not ideal by any means, but it would be more than suffice. I could actually, now thinking of it off the top of my head, let's do this here real quick. So what I would do, we wouldn't actually need to split that. We wouldn't need to duplicate it. I am lucking out because I have a plane right here. So we could just do rectangle center point. Again, one doesn't even need to be one the other way, but if you wanted it to, we'll just go 1 by half. Screwed that. I'm gonna go ahead and say symmetrical just a wee bit. New body. And then we go back into our manufacturer side of things. Our manual inspect is now going to be based off this face to this face. And as you can see, that is a very generic way to approach it, but then you would have your sphere dimension in Fusion. So I hope that helps. I know it's not the best of situations because we're not able to pick up tangent on that sphere, but as you're seeing, we can actually create a different system to do that. So Deep Thinker, I see another question on that V block. Put an angled hole and generate the ball mill toolpath that would skip over the hole. Don't touch the whole section. So you don't want to patch on that. You want me to avoid that. So no problem. So let's go back to the V block. Let's go ahead and add a hole to this face. And what we'll do is we'll scale that hole up just a little bit. Now, if I go back into manufacture, what I'm going to do is I'm first going to regenerate this toolpath. So as you're seeing, we're actually dipping inside of that hole, right? So there's a few things you can do in certain toolpaths. In this case, I could actually add a second edge for boundary, right? So if I go over here and I pick this edge now and hit OK, what you're going to see is we're still dipping in there because of our contact point boundary. And now that's not what he wants to do, is he wants to actually just skip over the hole, if I'm correct, Deep Thinker. Now, again, we can go back. We have that ability again, is you have contact only. So where it only makes contact, but now we would need to change. So we wouldn't use contact point boundary. We may actually have to say tool inside boundary, tool outside boundary. Again, my brain is not working the best at the moment. So let's go through and change a few more things. Now we could use a void touch surface as well. I am going to attempt a few more things on this before I jump to that side of things, right? Now it should be avoiding it based on contact only. And in this case, you guys aren't seeing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to jump further down. And this is usually what I recommend with people, is you should start up here at the top as much as you can and get as far as you can. Now, in this case, we're going to add in a surface to avoid. And this is going to be that surface, right? So now we could say avoid right here. And with that, we should now be avoiding that hole, but we're still dipping in. And the reason why we're still dipping in is because we haven't given that hole any type of thickness to it, right? So it thinks of this surface as the side itself. So this is where I may actually be better off in manufacture. You switch to design, create a patch on that hole, and then I could avoid this patch and create thickness. So again, as if I go back to manufacture, we say this time I'm not actually avoiding that surface. Oh, let's go in and edit. I want to avoid this surface. If I could pick that face, let's try that again. There we go. And then if I gave it some type of clearance, we would then stay away from that surface, right? So again, as you guys are going to continue to see this where it's like, oh, I still want to machine over it. It's because you've never actually given it anything to stay away from. So it's not completely going to avoid that surface until you give it something to avoid from, or in a distance to avoid from. Again, I've overkilled it there, but as you're seeing is we now are avoiding technically where that hole is. Keep in mind this toolpath is being calculated from the contact point. So if you're wondering why that blue line still runs across the bottom, the idea is that blue line is right about here. However, the radius of the cutter is sitting way up here towards this top. So I see Mads is asking about engraving with a ball end mill. Now, with a ball end mill, are you trying to engrave like block lettering, or are you trying to do single point type stuff? Because in the event you're trying to do single point engraving, which would be like a sketch or single line text, is if you use the trace toolpath, and with that trace toolpath, you were to use your ball end mill, that would allow for you to actually create an engraving, right? All based on single point. Now, if you're trying to engrave lettering using the engrave toolpath, what it's trying to do is create V profiles in the corners, and this would not allow that to happen, right? So the problem would be is you can't make a square corner or like a mitered corner with a ball end mill, and that's what it's telling you, and that's why it's giving you that error. Hopefully that works out for you there, Deep Thinker. Again, I gave that a pretty substantially large amount of avoidance, and you could actually reduce that number quite a bit and probably get what you want, right? If we went back down to like 10, again, I'm probably overlooking something simple like a certain boundary, but as you can see is by reducing that amount, what we're trying to do, and one thing I think a lot of people don't understand is when you're doing that avoid touch surface, it's always projecting that based on 3 axes, right? So as you saw axial and radial, it's still thinking, even though the surface is at an angle, it's still only thinking as if it was a horizontal projection outwards or a vertical, right? Because you don't have a 3-dimensional movement there. All right, I see a couple more questions here. Let me grab a drink and then we'll jump on those. We have crossed the 100 viewers so far line, so that is awesome news. So how do you deburr a hex top side with a chamfer on the edge created on a lathe and then mill the hex, making a radius? Ah, I see what you want. Okay. So you want, in lack of better terms, the manual way of how you would turn a bolt head, right? That's what you're looking to do? Deep Thinker, you're also correct exactly with your thinking about that question we just had before. This is why I like doing this, guys. So Deep Thinker thinks about this differently. I thought rectangle, he's thinking cylinder. So when we created that design, he's saying, oh, what would happen is if instead of using a rectangle, right? What if I would have came in here and I would have created a cylinder, right? So if I would create that 1-inch cylinder, I'm just placing that sketch tangent. But if you would give that cylinder some depth, same concept, we'll go ahead and say this is symmetrical, right? Again, new body. Now this time I have a lovely cylinder floating around in the background. Is if I go back into manufacture and we do that manual inspect, we'll create a brand new manual inspect for this one. Is if I grab that cylinder face, same concept, right? So as he said, is what happens if you do a cylinder instead of that actual sphere. And it's still the same results, right? We're still generating that 1 inch diameter in this case. Is we're just using a dummy solid or a dummy body in the background, whether it be square or rectangular, as funny as it is, to create that point of interest, right? So now I see, okay, cool. So you want to make what would be, again, we used to do this all the time in the old manual machining in the Marine Corps, is you want to make a bolt, but you want to turn the outside profile, right? So what we would do is, one, we would have to start by creating that profile for what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch, and this actually gives me a perfect opportunity. One of you all left a comment on my video, and I highly appreciate it, and I love it. I can't remember if it was a comment or not, but when I usually draw my lathe parts, I draw a center line, and then I work externally from that center line. We're going to do a bolt, so we're actually going to go down with this, and then I'm going to come out, we're going to go up, and then I'm going to create that bolt head, and we're going to add dimensions to this, guys. Stop making fun of me for my terrible drawings. So as you're going to see here, let's just say this bolt head is going to be a certain distance. Now, you guys know me. You've seen these videos where I type in 2 and I divide it by 1, right? Because I want a 1 inch diameter or a 2 inch diameter, but I want 1 inch radius, right? So actually it'd be 2 divided by 2. Having one of them days. You can see why I need you all to buy me beers. So 2 divided by 2 would be 1 inch radial, but 2 inch diameter, right? But somebody said, why don't you just make this a center line? And they're 100% right. And I hate to admit it, but if I go over here and instead of doing a construction line, I do a center line, I've now marked, and it's going to be hard to see. Let me see. You're going to see kind of a hashed line on your part. That is now your center line. But what that has saved me is so many keyboard clicks that when I dimension something now, again, if I want a 2 inch diameter head, as you can see, it's now automatically referencing my center line out to that dimension. Now, keep in mind, your center line, you do still have to pick the center line and go out when you do your dimensioning. So if I had just a straight normal edge down here, if I try to dimension from this line to here, it's still radial. So keep that in mind when you guys are working. Again, we'll go ahead and add a few more dimensions here. Let's just say this is going to be 1 inch diameter when it's finished. Actually, we're going to go a little less than that. Let's go 3/4. And there's our terrible bolt, 3 inches long. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to revolve said bolt, right? Now, I intentionally left something out because we're going to go back and fix it. But from here, we're going to go ahead and apply another sketch up top. We want a lovely, where is it? I always forget which one it is. Not spline, polygon. There we go. So we're going to do an inscribed polygon. You could also do circumscribed. It's up to you. One is just internal versus external. So there's our 6-sided bolt. I'm going to remove the outside so that we have that hex head. And what he was asking is on the head of these bolts, the old way you used to turn bolts is when you made bolts on a manual lathe, you would come in here and you would actually turn the chamfer around the top here. And then you would go to a mill and you would mill that. Well, what I would do is if I was trying to recreate that, you actually do both sides, as funny as it is, but I would do that at my sketch level, right? So if we go back to the sketch that is now upside down and backwards, if I was to add in those couple of lines that I want, I can create that profile. Now, I'm going to show you guys a couple of ways. So I'm only going to do one of these, right? And you'll see why. You notice how I have to create this line. I have to create an angle, yada, yada, yada. I swear if I look over at chat right now, because I just saw somebody's chat come in, and you guys are about to say what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to lose it today. It's been one of them days. Y'all are done. I'm going to stop the stream. All right, good. Quick question. Okay. So what you're seeing me do is I actually drew that profile, right? So if we go ahead and get that pulled up, right here is that revolved profile, right? So when I did my revolve, I now unselect said body. And now you notice I have that kind of undercut feature. And then because the rest of my timeline is still in effect, notice how it has now cut that chamfer. Now, I know this answers the question, and it is not the right way to do this, in my opinion. but it is a different way to think if you're new to Fusion, right? By just simply drawing that little sketch there, I can create that bevel around my part. But it gets better, because had we actually rolled back our timeline instead, from right after when we revolved it, it's why I left it off the backside, is do not, if you guys can, by all means, avoid drawing your chamfers and your fillets. Because if I came in here at the model level and did a chamfer here, as you guys saw me do before, I could do a distance and an angle, right? So if I came in this far and I wanted, 30-degree angle put on this, again, very, very much an estimate. But as you can see, again, by changing my timeline and rolling my timeline back forward, I have completely broken this part, but it's fixable, right? So what has happened, and the reason why my part has broke, is because when we created that sketch has projected the edge furthest out. So what you guys are seeing me do is repair something that would have never been a problem in the first place, because I have made the mistake of doing it intentionally wrong, to give you guys an example, right? So what I really need to do now is I need to fix that sketch. So let's go to my sketch. Now I would project this outside edge, right? So now we have these little corners to cut out, which means we can now fix our extrude. And what you're going to notice, I know you guys buckle up, you got to bear with me here, but you're going to get the same results, whether it's inside or outside. The idea is still the same, right? So based on the amount of chamfer, distance, and angle that I've done, I've achieved that on both sides of my part. So hopefully this answers your question and gives you a couple of examples of what to do. Also, keep in mind, I could have did an extrude instead of extrude cut when we did that hex. Had I done my hex larger than that cylinder, that would also allow me to do an extrude join. But nothing more than being able to revolve your part. Whether you do the chamfer after the revolve or you sketch the chamfer, it's still the same process. You're just going to add that hex pattern at the end. Yep, you machine those parts first op in the lathe, and then the second milling the hex. Yep, 100%. But as you can see, as I've created that cylinder, and if I needed to go to the lathe now, I would go ahead and create my setup. This is turning. Would like my Z the other way, I assume is the way he's doing these. And then we have our stock and everything. So if I was to go in now and do my, turning profile rough, grab a tool from the default library, right-handed cutter. As you guys are going to see, that's going to rough out that outside profile. Again, we could then do our finish profile and so forth and so on. But that's where we're getting that angle and that spun profile, so that later on, when we take them from here, he's saying, let's go ahead and throw it in the mill now. So I want to stand it up in my mill. We're going to go milling. And then from here, one nice thing is if you do things right in Fusion, like turn on continuous rest machining in your stock for your second setup, you'll notice my stock is now green, and I would go in and I would do my, 2D contour around the part. Maybe I would turn on the stock so that I can make sure that we're only machining so much. And then we would go get yours truly's favorite tool if it's going to work on this part and machine around the outside of that hex, right? So again, it's very straightforward to be able to draw those things, model those things, and then move over in Fusion. Now, if he was making different size bolts and different size bolt heads, the cool thing is we've tied everything here all together. So if he was to go back to design and change anything in his sketch's profile, again, it's all up to the end user, right? So if he was to go up to like a 2.5 head diameter, depending on how my other sketches have played, as you're seeing, my model is absolutely broken in some cases, and it's because my inscribed hex has not changed, but you would be able to walk that through the process and again, quickly create those results. I did not design this to be quickly changed. I wanted to show you guys just the walkthrough, right? I'm going to undo this just so we get back to a normal profile. So from here, I see another question. I move my browser. How do I put in place fixed? No, I need a little more information on that. I move my browser. How do I put in place fixed. Awesome. So it looks like that answers the question. But yeah, I mean, it's not the first time I've had that question about, like, we do this on the lathe, we do that on the mill, and then, you know, it goes back to the lathe, right? But as you saw, once I had the model design, the CAM side of it becomes very easy and simple. Any other questions outside of that? I should probably scroll up, make sure there's nothing else. I do like that deep thinker. That was a good idea, doing the cylinder instead of doing the box. I don't think either one of us was a winner because I used the sphere tool. I think you would be the winner if I had to guess in the long scheme of things, because if I had to draw an actual sphere and I was making a part for it, I would still do the same thing as you guys saw here, right? Like, I would do a center line profile, and what you can see here is I can make this very exaggerated. Oh, we don't want to finish sketch. We want this to be our center line. And then if I made my, ball, usually I would then revolve this 1/2. Again, create my revolve, 360. There's my sphere. And in the background lurking is still that sketch that I could then go through and create, that extruded profile for me to create whatever it is that I needed on the manual inspect side of things, right? So in this case, I believe Deep Thinker beat me to it. He's got the better solution, right? I'm just trying to put the square peg in the round hole. So as always, guys, any of you guys join in, any questions you may have, we've been going for an hour and a half strong. Lots of questions today. I love to hear it. I think, what are we, about a week out from Thanksgiving at this point? Any other questions outside of that for anybody and everybody? Feel free to ask those questions in chat. I should probably check Discord in the meantime. Go ahead and make sure no support tickets have come in, which I'm actually kind of happy none have came in, because it has been one of those Monday through Fridays, just absolute craziness. I got to put together a swing set this weekend for my kids down in the basement. For those of you wondering how I fit a swing set in my basement, we own a very old 1940s school we have a gymnasium in our basement. Super wild. I see the viewers starting to drop. I see whopping 13 of you guys in here. Like I said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out, ask any of those questions. Maybe I'll go back and continue to completely ruin this intake plenum. Again, any of those questions at any time. So as we're seeing, it looks like our extrude did not follow through. Let's see here. There it is. Yep. So it looks like when we broke that, let's go ahead and unselect, reselect, join, and away we go. Awesome. So now we have our lower, our upper. Anything else we wanted to do to it? Oh, we got another question. What else do we got? Best way to send me the Fusion file. So there is a support email down at the bottom of the description of this video. Should still be down there. If not, I'm going to have a talk with myself, because I'm the one that manages that. Let me pull it up. You can send it to that support email and it will create a ticket automatically. You guys let me know, is that email still down there at the bottom? It should be. The support@jitcadcam.zohodesk.com. That will auto-generate a ticket, and what it will do is it'll actually email notify me. Now you got me worried. Usually when you guys send me parts, it's like complete mayhem for some reason. And let me get OBS pulled back up so I can see your guys'. Oh, there we go. Any other questions outside of that in the meantime? So I see Anthony. Anthony, seen loads of the videos. I'm particularly keen on learning to edit/create post processors. In your opinion, what is the best source to learn from? Oh man, that's a hard question, because I'll be honest with you, man. I just go in there and mess around with stuff. That is the best way. I'm a learner like that, but if you really are looking to learn the best way to do post-processor work, I would say, one, you kind of need to know JavaScript, but if you go to, let me pull it up here. I'll slide this over here in a second. Is Autodesk has a manual on their website. Let's move this over for you guys. And where that manual is right here. So presumably, this entire manual is built around post-processors in every way, shape, or form. And I've talked about it. This is kind of the Bible of everything and anything. And one nice thing is you can actually Control F and search this document. So if you wanted to do tool change, for example, again, there's an entire on section for tool changes, right? And you can jump down and then it walks you through anything and everything and how it's going to be created, the way it is wrote out even inside of Fusion or inside the Fusion post. Now, this thing does lack a little bit when you get updates, but the cool thing is as you're seeing is if I'm running into a problem, this is where I tend to go. The reason why I would tell you guys why you would want to know a little bit about Java is in the case of what they have going on here is the whole idea of how to structure your if, else statements, things like that. Now, I've never taken a JavaScript course. I've always been one just to tinker with it and learn the hard way. Now, I try to give you guys video content based on the stuff that you guys ask me all the time, but that would be where I would point you to go. So, I mean, this manual works pretty good. I mean, just getting into a post and trying to play around with it is probably the best way I've ever seen it. I do a lot of copy and paste. And anybody out there that writes post-processors, they're not out there writing post-processors from scratch. Very rare that I see that. We all start with an already wrote pretty close to post. So give me a sec, guys. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go and kick off my screen. Let's do this here real quick. I'm going to make you guys have to look here and think about why you should buy me a beer. I'm going to get this part. One sec. And I'm assuming you're on my live stream and you're sending me a part file. So I think we're going to be okay to put this up. Oh yeah, you even titled it Question for Fusion. Parallel to the... All right, let's download this file. And let's get it uploaded here. I apologize if any of you guys hear my dogs barking in the background. Where are we? Free Support Friday, November 22nd. Upload this file. All right, that is uploading. And now I should be able to bring myself back up into Spectrum. There we go. You guys can see my lovely face. Lathe blank sample 4th axis part. All right, let's see what we got. So we got a lot of tool paths. We got a part here. It looks like you're trying to keep those studs and machine around them based on this part. Is that correct, Anthony? Or not Anthony, Jonathan? You guys and your names. We got Anthony Johnson, Jonathan Jackson, all messaging back and forth a bunch. So in a perfect world, you're never really going to be able to machine a perfect square around this part, right? Because this cylinder projected down, you would actually have two separate tool paths. You would have to have one that actually is tangent to this surface and then one that is parallel to this vertical surface, right? Usually when we see parts like this, they tend to put a little fillet around the bottom. But let's go ahead and evaluate what you have so far. So you're doing a lot of 3D parallel stuff. It looks like to clean. Okay, I see what you did. So you went in and you presumably turned this part on the lathe, judging by lathe blank up here. And then so you're using that as a solid for your stock. Awesome. Little tip here, just so you know, Anthony, had you programmed the lathe part in Fusion and kept that all in the same pot, in the same file, you would have been able to pull that stock model over all in one shot. But so again, as he's using rotary pocket to clean out that area, not a terrible way to go. I like it. Again, facing off the nubs. Looks like he's trying to cut around those areas and he's starting to realize that you can't quite tilt. And what other stuff do we have? Okay. So with that being said, what I would actually say is I would possibly look at using like a swarf toolpath on something like this. And the reason for that is swarf is going to allow you to follow that lower chain, right? So if you go into an advanced swarf toolpath, you now have the ability to do fourth axis. Again, we're going to go based on the x-axis direction. I feel like I'm having deja vu because I just went over this a few days ago. If you didn't see on our Facebook, we posted a video. It was for an internal side of this part. Not this part, but a very similar part. So as you can see, as we're now setting that up, again, we can go through, and because swarf does allow you to pick a surface, again, the only problem is going to be is trying to maintain that around that and vary in our Z height. So if this doesn't work, we might have to look at doing something like a trace toolpath, right? So as you can see, we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And in this very simple situation, we've, of course, got an error here. And that error is probably more than likely not going to allow us to do it, which would lead me to believe that we could go in and we could actually do this with trace. Now, the reason why I would look at using trace is because it is allowing Z axis up and down, right? So we have a curve to work off of. Now, we do need to, very rarely do I have to do this. We need to turn on compensation. And then from there, we should see that that tool is going to come down and go up and around. Now, keep in mind, because of the way that tool is actually working, we would never be able to get that tool lower than that lip, right? Which is part of the problem that you've probably encountered, right, Anthony? But as you're seeing here, as we'll give him a second to answer, because he has gone in with 2D contour and kind of attempted the same thing, which means in his 2D contour, the difference is he's only going as low as the highest point, in this case, on the bottom of that. Where if we compare that to the trace toolpath, you kind of see how this trace toolpath is bowing down. Now, it does look like he's protruding into his part just a hair, but that trace toolpath would be good to get you close. So we do need to, in some way, shape, or form, now clean up basically this surface, which would mean we would need a toolpath that's going to hold the tool perpendicular to this face. So I think he's already done it. Now, I would look at something on this part as using rotary pocket or rotary contour even. Now, what that actually has, and I think a lot of people overlook this, is when you're actually machining, let me make sure I'm talking about the right thing here, because usually I get that wrong. Nope, we're going to go, not rotary contour. Where is it here? Trying to think off the top of my head. There's an ability to actually set it to machine based on a certain point on that tool. And I think it is fixed tone, or no, that's for, let's see here. We're going to go x-axis. You know, it might actually be in another toolpath. Go with parallel here. In the meantime, if any of you guys have any questions, feel free. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so based on your tool axis, you have what's called two rotary. But what you may want to do is do a two curve type of method. And what two curve is you're going to point the tool at the curve itself, right? Now, it's not going to work because we're going to be deep in the corner here. And you'll see that it will look actually quite wild when we set this up. But it's still the same concept, right? So if we said set up X, I want to point the tool to a curve. And then I don't think it's going to allow me to do it with the old flat. Yep. So we're going to go, and again, the idea is to curve. The reason why it can't point it at the curve is because that curve is smaller than the profile that we're trying to cut, and it doesn't know how to point down that tool. So we may have to do some Hollywood magic in some ways. Let's go ahead and give this a try with a sketch. And now a lot of you guys are probably wondering what I'm doing with the sketch. We're going to go ahead and do a project 3D. And then can we do an offset of a 3D profile? We cannot. So we may have to play around with this a little bit. Anybody else have any questions in the meantime? This is going to be the one that I got to run out for the last 16 minutes to figure out the best way to get around that lug. Again, let's go ahead and take a look. Guide curve. Let's go lower. Core surface. Track floor. See if we can get it with 5-axis, if it's 4-axis or 5-axis. Oh, looks like we still have empty toolpath. And of course, we're not getting any notes on this. The good old Autodesk, guys, if you want to add in some better notes as to why this may or may not be working. And I think I have some ideas on it, but we're going to go ahead and continue to play with this. Let's see. Yep, we don't need clearance. Don't need extension, blend. We're going to go from bottom. I still don't think it's going to make a difference. But you could wrap a 2D toolpath. I figured one of you guys were going to ask that. The problem is going to be is if you do 2D and you do a wrap, right? What is going to happen is with that wrapped toolpath, the tool center of the tool always points down to the center of the profile. So what's actually going to happen, and I can draw this better than I can explain it, it is going to get you close, and it's not a wrong answer by any means. But what is actually happening is based on that tool, and if I draw this, a 3-point rectangle, I'll show you guys that there's all kinds of cool, right? So let's just say this is my end mill, right? And that is going to, again, based on the center line of my profile, that is what's going to align to center of my part, right? So if we had a feature here, oh, on a parallel guy to that guy. So again, is with that shape that he has, that shape is again coming off of center, but as you can see, this end mill still has this little bitty area here because the edge of the wall that he's trying to machine is going to come outwards. Now, it's not going to come outwards at this angle when you think about it. It's actually going to come outwards based on something like this because, again, it's a lug that's on center. So as this end mill makes its way around, maybe I can make this so that it will tilt. Not so much, but what you're seeing is you're never going to get this front edge to get down in there, right? Because Fusion is calculating from the center point of the toolpath, not the edge of the tool. Yes, that would be nice. Would it work if you put a fillet in the radius of the corner? Well, if you had a fillet in the corner of this profile, right? So if we go back to design and I throw on a fillet, how big can we go? 0625? Well, that's overkill. 03125? That's a little better. So as you can see, if there was a fillet there, obviously a round tool would be easy as can be. So if we were to manufacture this, I would still tell people to go back. You're still going to do like a trace toolpath, or you're going to actually do a kind of a blend toolpath. But our curve selection could be here. This only works, guys, because I know the math on this. So we're going to go ahead and say 1/8 inch ball. Where is it? And then we are going to say we want a offset minus point. What did I do? 03125, right? 325, but we're going to actually need to do a smaller tool if I remember. Oh, and we need cutter comp on, right? Cutter comp left. As you can see, again, with that ball end mill, I'm using too big of a ball. I designed this based on, we would actually be using a 16th inch ball. Let's swap that out. But yeah, so now you can see that tool would come down. And then you would see it, it would actually trace up and around, and that would take care of that blend, right? As you're seeing. We would still need to blend into that in some way, shape, or form, which we could obviously do multiple passes now or something of that nature. But for a clean, square-edged corner, it's going to be tricky. That's for sure. Because what we need is, like I was showing you guys, is we need to be able to define this as our contact point, not the center line of our tool, right? And I'm really trying to think what tool I get this question, I feel like once every 3 months, and I got to completely change how I think about how a toolpath works or how to utilize a toolpath to do that. In the meantime, is there any other questions out there? I see more and more people coming in and going out, and it seems we're closing in. I think on the record, I think the record's 145 views in a 2-hour session. So let's, oh man. Actually, so you wouldn't even be able to do it that way. I don't think. Because with your fourth axis, ZX, X-axis, yeah. Because even if you did lean and lead, you would still need to know the actual tilt angle to achieve that, right? That would be the hardest thing about it, is how are you going to be able to go in and achieve that thing, right? Because even if we combined it now, I'm going to have to regenerate all of this. Let's see. Okay, so let's do this. No offense to everything that he's done up to this part. We're going to delete it. And we know advanced swarf is still giving us problems. And of course, yours truly is now picking the wrong profile. So let's go ahead and switch this. Let's go ahead and say this one is actually the profile we want to. That's because we modified that model, right? And orientation is now over here. There we go. And then we did do that wrap toolpath. Yes. Wrap toolpath is actually going to go over here. How do I feel like that's going to be? Oh, now it's the opposite. Guys, it's legendary. I'm always backwards. Direction. So even though we went ahead and did it with these two toolpaths, right? We've tried our best to do it square to this face. And then again, because we're centerline, we're still pointing that tool to center. We're not able to say based on that outer edge, if we simulate this, I might have to turn my accuracy way up, or we might be able to see and give it to us today. Yeah, I'm going to have to turn my accuracy up because I don't think we're going to be able to see that little bitty cusp that's still sitting around the outside of the part, right? Let's go tolerance down to, it's probably less than 1,000, right? Yeah, we're going to have to turn our accuracy up. Yeah, nope. You're seeing it there. All right. So we are seeing it. So you see how we're still just not getting that one little spot right there? That is the problem we're going to sit here and fight. And you can actually see it now in this angle, is because that you have that tool with the wrap versus the tool with trace. There's this ever so slightly little nipple or this little dimple kind of hanging out right here. I may have to take this one offline and drive myself crazy all weekend to remember how I always have to overcome and do this. Any other questions out there by any of you guys in the meantime? Always happy to continue to work on this as much as I can. Want to make sure that we leave the door open for anybody else that may have questions at any time. And obviously, for your case, Jonathan, I have your contact information. I will be more than happy to help you in any way I can. Just running through all of the different channels to make sure nobody's putting out any questions. Cool. Awesome. Let's go ahead and jump back over. I don't see any new questions populating inside of there, so let's take a look. So, one thing that may or may not work. Yeah, I mean, that's the way most people would do it. Deep Thinker, you're not wrong, is trying to trace it with the smallest tool you have, but you're still in that realm of always leaving that little nib. As funny as, I'm just trying to think. A lot of different ways to do stuff, and I'm trying to remember a way to do. You guys always ask me the best question. Because even if you did scallop and you did fourth axis, you're still stuck to the same confines, right? Are you doing from curve to curve, yada, yada, yada. But going to rotary axis, you can add additional tilt. But what you can't do is actually say it's said angle. You would have to measure that angle and hope that you can, right? Trying to think what other toolpaths would allow you Because you can't define based on the edge of the tool. You're always defining based on the center of the tool. Give me... You might have stumped me here for a moment, and then I'm going to have to show everybody how to do this next Friday. I'm really trying to remember off the top of my head. It's been one of them weeks. Any other questions for you guys? Anything at all? I don't want to end on a bad note. We're down to the 5-minute mark, right? You guys are making me sweat. Oh, that wouldn't even work. Trying to imagine what would be the best way to achieve. Split face. You guys are going to think I'm crazy here in a minute. Because that's what we want, is the shoulder of the tool to basically do that, right? Even though this is technically the profile that we're trying to cut. And we can actually change opacity. That kind of makes sense to you guys now? That's really realistically what we want, is the tool, the side of the tool to follow this profile, right? And we might be able to actually fake it out now using advanced swarf if we're machining the right body still. Okay. And advanced swarf. 4th axis. This surface. Maybe. Oh. We need to rotate around. Yep. Still mad at me. Still mad at me. Sometimes gotta go back to the OG stuff. Normal swarf, tell us. Contour. There. We're getting closer. We are getting closer. Oh, I gotta jump back. So I do see a couple of questions coming in. All right, hold on here real quick. Do you guys see this? First off, I am using normal swarf to do this, which seems to be a possibility. Yes. So let's see if we go guide curve. I'm just kidding. You force this. Oh, still hates me. So the problem is, though, with advanced swarf, so you guys know, this is kind of what we want, is the tool to use the side of the tool, which is why we're choosing a swarf toolpath. But we want it to chase basically this profile so that we're actually getting all the way in here with the square end of the tool. So if you're really wondering, or you're seeing how this math is done, or Autodesk, if you're watching this video, it'd be nice to be able to define the actual edge of the cutting surface, not just the actual, center line of that tool when doing this stuff. Or yours truly is completely wrong, and one of you all are going to tell me in chat the better way to do this, and I fully support you. But to give you that comparison, right? But as you can see, that tool now traces all the way around. And now this toolpath looks weird. And keep in mind, what we're really actually following is this edge, because that edge is where the square part of our flat end mill is touching, right? So we're getting that blend based on that there. How do you ensure soft jaws always locate properly when removing and replacing them from the vise? So what I would do if I was you doing soft jaw type stuff, Ash, is I would make a locator hole, or as Matt's saying, put a dowel pin between the two. Personally, what I usually do is I actually leave my front jaw one a little bit to the loose side so it self-aligns. The one I care about is the back fixed jaw. And once I put it in there and I put my part in, that front one can wiggle a little bit and actually lock itself down. Any other questions outside of that? I know this is a little crazy to be looking at. We are coming down to the wire. Actually, we just hit the 2-hour mark. I'm not going to completely cut you guys off yet. It's 3 o'clock on the money. We'll play around with this for a few more minutes and see what we can come up with. I would like to get a tool path here, but I just don't think it's going to happen with the old advanced swarf. Any other questions? Opening up the floor. I see Matt made it in here this week. It's always great to have Matt in here. He's the one, if you guys didn't know, he's the reason why I made a video on doing broaching on Wednesday. Because he had a genius idea on how to do it with the trace tool path. It's funny that I can't get fourth axis, which the fourth axis add-on has kind of been a newer thing. Fourth axis and advanced swarf to work. But I can definitely get the old version, which I guess that would be a good thing. Can I go 5-axis here? Must be yours truly picking the wrong stuff, because even if it won't do 5-axis, do tool orientation. Do I have to point Z this way in order for this to work? I'm gonna laugh if I do. Nope, still nothing. Empty tool path. Let's do what we always tell people to do, right? Brand new tool path. We're going to do advanced swarf. We are going to do this with 5-axis surfaces. This guy. Guide curve. Upper. Actually, you know what? We're not going to do guide floor surface, right? Nope. This tool path just hates me. I'm going to have to play with this over the weekend and bring it back up to you guys when I get a chance. Obviously, I hate to leave you guys on an end note, but at this point, I'm going to do my outro, which means one of you is probably going to ask a question here at the end. I do appreciate all of you guys jumping in and seeing this. Obviously, if you haven't caught on yet, we've been doing live streams at least twice a week, Workflow Wednesdays and Free Support Fridays. Feel free to check out next Wednesday's video when we go over how to use the Simplify command in the model workspace to remove things like holes, fillets, and chamfers automatically, to make machining on the actual manufacturer workspace much easier to do. With that, also, I got to let you guys know, if you want to support our channel in any way, shape, or possible, the freest way, of course, is to like, subscribe, and share. And for some of you that buy me a beer, the most expensive way is to buy me a beer. Now, anywhere outside of that, you can buy your Fusion through yours truly. We also conduct training and post-processor edits. Feel free to shoot us an email with any questions or anything you guys have. And as always, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I'm going to leave you guys out to it. Have a great weekend, and I will see all of you back on Workflow Wednesday next week. Thanks. Bye.